Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about ancient philosophy today. Seriously, if you've ever studied these ancient texts, prepare to look at them through an entirely new lens. For centuries, scholars have looked at Chapter 9 of the Tao Te Ching and kind of just nodded in agreement, saying, oh, it's a moral teaching, a nice poetic lecture on humility, on knowing your place, and the ethical dangers of greed. Well, let's dive into this widely accepted truth about Laozi's text and immediately prove why it's fundamentally incomplete. Because when you actually decode this text through the lens of modern astrophysics, it's not about morality at all. It is literally a 2,500-year-old manual for thermodynamics and systemic stability. It isn't about being a good person. It's about the fundamental physics of survival in a universe that is totally governed by entropy. What we're actually looking at here is a brilliantly disguised survival guide. It reveals the universe's ultimate algorithms for survival against entropy, directly warning us of the catastrophic consequences of pushing any system past its physical limits. So, here's our roadmap. We'll kick off with the physics of philosophy, hit the critical point, explore the trap of over-optimization, dive into extreme potential energy, talk about returning to the ground state, and wrap up with the physics of the breaks. All right, Section 1, the critical point. Let's look at saturation and collapse at the macro level. Lao Tzu drops this famous line, better stop short than fill to the brim. On the surface, sure, it sounds like a nice little lesson in moderation, but let's strip away the poetry for a second and look at the raw physics. In thermodynamics, pushing a closed system to its absolute maximum capacity is basically asking for trouble. It forces it into a highly unstable state. You see, a system filled to the brim loses its slack, its buffer. At this critical point of saturation, the surface tension is stretched to its absolute maximum limit. This means even the most microscopic external perturbation, a tiny fluctuation in temperature, a single tiny vibration, will overwhelm that surface tension and trigger a catastrophic systemic collapse. The universe inherently favors systems with empty space, because that emptiness provides the resilience you actually need to absorb cosmic shocks. Moving on to Section 2, the trap of over-optimization and structural vulnerability. Let's zoom all the way down to the atomic level. You've probably heard this one. Over-sharpen the blade, and the edge will soon be blunt. It sounds like practical blacksmithing advice, right? But the underlying science here is absolutely mind-blowing, and it applies to modern engineering just as much as it does to ancient swords. At the atomic level, sharpening a blade to its absolute limit means you are actively stripping away essential atomic bonds. You're creating a hyper-specialized structure just to achieve maximum sharpness, but in doing so, you make the structure fundamentally brittle. It becomes completely defenseless against the inescapable forces of entropy. Things like friction, wear, and oxidation will just tear it apart. There's a really profound physical trade-off happening here. Extreme optimization actually destroys structural integrity. The universe actively destroys over-engineered structures because they have literally zero margin for error. A suboptimal edge, one that retains some thickness and structural buffer, will naturally withstand entropy far longer than a blade that's been taken to its absolute extreme. Which brings us to Section 3. Extreme potential energy, or the voltage drop. Let's scale back up from the atomic level to human society and examine the physics of hoarding. Amass a store of gold and jade, and no one can protect it. A hall overflowing with wealth invites disaster. Now, historically, we've read this as a warning about human greed and jealousy, but again, physics tells a totally different story. It happens because of inescapable physical laws. According to the second law of thermodynamics, energy is always seeking equilibrium. So the crucial point here is that amassing massive amounts of localized wealth creates an extreme gradient of potential energy. You're forcing a massive differential between one spot and everything else around it. This creates immense physical pressure. It's literally like a massive voltage drop just waiting to violently discharge. In human systems, this sudden discharge of energy manifests as theft, conflict, or systemic collapse. It is physically impossible to isolate and protect extreme, localized, high-energy states from the universe's natural drive toward equilibrium. Okay, Section 4, returning to ground state. Let's look at riding the cosmic wave as we zoom out to the ultimate scale, the life cycles of stars, civilizations, and quantum fields. Retire when the work is done. This is the way of heaven. Withdrawing once the task is accomplished is positioned here not as career advice, but as the ultimate cosmic law. Think about it. Every single phenomenon in the universe operates as a sine wave. Reaching the peak of success is simply hitting the crest of that wave. Attempting to artificially cling to that peak means you are fighting against a natural gravitational pull and the inevitable downward phase of the wave. And when you fight that wave, you generate massive thermal friction and system-destroying energy loss. Take a look at this character meaning retire or withdraw. By gracefully stepping back right at the peak, you seamlessly align yourself with the natural decay of the sine wave. You return smoothly to the stable ground state without generating any resistance. It really is the ultimate algorithm for energy conservation. And that brilliantly illustrates how the way, the Tao, is nothing more than the universe's flawless algorithm for sustainable energy conservation. It's the path of least resistance, avoiding the friction that destroys systems entirely. Finally, Section 5, the physics of the breaks. Let's synthesize everything we've decoded today into a survival strategy you can actually use. When you lay it all out side by side like this, it is undeniable. Chapter 9 is not merely ancient poetry. Filling to the brim? That's the critical point of saturation. Over-sharpening? That's brittle fracture. Hoarding? That's an extreme potential energy gradient. Retiring? That's the sine wave decay to ground state. This is a remarkably sound, scientifically accurate survival strategy against entropy. I like to call this the physics of the breaks. Listen, if you want to harmonize with the self-regulating flow of the cosmos, you absolutely must learn to step back before entropy tears your systems apart. We have to maintain a buffer. We must actively avoid the temptation of brittle over-optimization. And most importantly, we cannot fight the downward phase of the wave. Because in the grand cosmic scheme, survival isn't about clawing your way to the peak and stubbornly trying to stay there forever. It's about knowing exactly when to step off. To survive the universe's unstoppable drive toward entropy, ask yourself, have you mastered the art of the perfect exit? Think about that as you look at the systems you're building in your own life.